Hi guys, welcome back to the Code Chic. Today I start another new series on CSS. By the end of this video, you'll be able to understand what CSS is, CSS file extensions. You'll also be able to know the general syntax and also selectors. At the end of it all, we shall see the different ways of writing CSS. Basically, the purpose of CSS is to provide web developers with a standard way to define, apply and manage sets of styles and characteristics. Before you start writing CSS, you need to have a basic knowledge on how to use computers. You need to have some softwares installed on your computer, especially the development environment, and also you must have basic knowledge of HTML as well. So what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it is a language for describing the presentation of a web page. This includes colors, layouts, and fonts. This make our web pages presentable to the users. CSS is designed to make style sheets for the web. A CSS file is normally identified by the .css extension. You can open and edit CSS files in various web development applications and code editors. For example, Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, Notepad++, etc. If you want to learn more about CSS file extensions, you can visit fileinfo.com/extension/CSS. Now, how do we write CSS? A CSS rule normally consists of two components, a selector and a declaration. The selector points out to the element where the CSS style is going to be applied. The CSS are separated by semicolons. Here is an example of CSS syntax. One, we have the selector. The selector basically points out which element to pick out and add styles to. And then we have the property. This is an identifier that is a human readable name and defines which feature is considered, and the value describes how the feature must be handled. For example, font size, we are telling CSS to increase the size or reduce the size of the font, and then the value is how big or how small we want our font to be. And then we have text align, which is a property, and the value is center. That tells CSS to push our texts to the center. So we have selectors. A selector is basically the first part of a CSS rule. As previously seen, it tells the browser which HTML element should be picked and have property values inside the rule applied to them. There are a couple of CSS selectors. We are going to focus on three main ones which is commonly used. We have an ID selector. This uses the ID attribute of an HTML element to select specific element. If you have no idea what an attribute is, I made a video on HTML attributes. Maybe you can go back and watch that video. The ID selector selects an element based on the value of its ID. There should be only one element with a given ID in a document. For example, if we have an ID called logo, we start styling it by starting with hash and the ID name, and then we proceed to give it styles. This will match the element that has the ID logo. We have class selectors. This selects all elements that have a given class. For example, if we have a class called footer, we start writing a class CSS with a dot and then the class name, which is footer, and then we give it the respective styles that follows the property and value. We have tag selectors. This selects all elements that have the given node name. This could be a tag name. The element selector selects HTML elements based on their tag names. For example, we have P, which is a tag, and then property followed by value. Other types of selectors, we have attribute selectors, combinators, pseudo classes and elements, and many more others. You'll encounter a few attribute selectors while you learn CSS. This is the syntax of writing attribute selectors. For example, we have an attribute called data type, and you start writing it with squared brackets and then followed by the CSS syntax, curly brackets, property and value. We have also combinators. Combinators basically select nodes that are descendants of the first element. For example, we have an element called article, but within the article we have another element called h1. So this is how we write the combinators. Pseudo classes and pseudo elements. These ones basically automatically allow the selection of elements based on state information that is not contained on the document tree. For example, if you have an anchor tag and then you want an action to it, you just write the anchor tag followed by semicolon and then hover. So that means when you hover on a given anchor tag, it will execute this CSS rule, color and the value. There are so many other types of selectors as we shall discover while we do guided practice. How do we write CSS? There are 3 ways we write CSS. First is the inline styles. These are placed within HTML elements. For example, let's open our VS Code. So let's open the browser side by side. Alright, so let's demonstrate how the inline CSS works. For example, I want this, my favorite movie list, to have a background color or to be bold or to have a certain style. So I'll just go where this line is. This is right where it is. And then I write my style inside it by just typing style equals that, and then I'll just give it a property which is color, for example, and then I give it a color of my choice. So I could say maybe pink and then semicolon. So you can clearly see that the color of this has changed to pink. So the second way of writing CSS is placing it in the head section of the web page. This is called internal styles. Let's look at a simple example. Go back to VS Code and then let's pick another element, for example the list. So we just go into the head area and then we write the style tag. And then inside the style tag, we pick an element, say for example, the OL lists. This can be a class. So let's just give it a class instead of working with a tag and call it list group. And then we give this also a class and call it list item. Alright, now that we have our style right here, let's pick out the list group here. Now, so let's style this class list item, which is right here. List item, we said display inline block. So you see how they change. So next thing is, so simply right click here and create a new file, and then we call the file index.css. Press enter. To link the styles here to the HTML, we have to use the link tag, which is just written within the head region. So first off, let's try to write a style without linking. So for example, we are going to pick the body tag here, and then we come to index.css. Then you just write body, and then we give it a background color. Yes, let's give it blue violet. So upon writing this, we expected our page to change to blue violet, but nothing has happened. The reason is we have not linked this file to HTML file. So to link that file, we simply go to index just below the title, type the link tag, and then we link index.css. Our style is then automatically picked. So thank you so much guys for watching. In the next series of videos, we shall be looking at CSS Flexbox and also CSS box model. And then after that, we shall have a hands-on full web development in HTML and CSS. And then we finish the series of HTML and CSS. So stick around. See you in the next video. Bye.